Now we focus on domestic tax matters that are under the spotlight at this year's Tax Indaba. That gathering is hosted by the South African Institute of Taxation and is expected to conclude today. To help us unpack what's taken place so far at the three-day event is SAIT CEO Keith Engel. Keith, thank you so much for your time. We know that the 2022 Tax Indaba concludes today. What has been top on the agenda, especially because South Africa is still discussing what is known as a wealth tax, but we have never seen the light of day in this regard.
Okay, I want to talk about the wealth tax first. I mean, the wealth tax has been floating around ever since the Davis Committee, and that's been around a while, and even Davis held back on it. You get one force that's saying that, look, we need to redistribute because the rich are still too rich next to the rest of the country. The problem is our rich is mostly consisting of middle class. But there is still a push to redistribute, and you see it again by the ANC conference. We didn't cover it too much. We had a prior conference on that. But if you look over at the economic picture, it's difficult to do it. And what you saw, and that was discussed in your prior session, is the nature of our economics is such that we're just not getting any growth. And the way to solve the problem of inequality is through getting better growth. Now, you can redistribute, but what's very difficult and what the economists have shown is that the middle class has gotten slightly poorer, and there are some that have gotten richer. Not a lot, but some. The problem is that the rich tend to migrate, and we're seeing a migration. And so getting a wealth tax is becoming harder and harder because that money is becoming portable. The only way to really have a wealth tax is to go after land, and that's going to create a problem in farming and other areas. So we're not seeing a big push on the wealth tax, but at least by government, but you do see it by the party, and we'll see what comes out of the latest cabinet meetings and so forth. But it'll be hanging with us for a while. There's going to be a call.
Another interesting element, Keith, is that Cabinet is also now said to be talking about how South Africa is likely to fund what would be known as a social relief fund. And there was a report that was commissioned for Intellidex by Business Unity South Africa just earlier this year, indicating that a hike in VAT would be able to fund that social relief particular fund. What are your views there on the side of tax practitioners about the feasibility of this?
Well, look, it's easy to raise a VAT, and that's the easiest way to get the money. And it hits across the board. The problem is that you're going to raise the cost for the very people you're trying to help, so that doesn't really make a lot of sense. And politically, there's no way you're going to be able to raise the VAT. So the people who are really pushing for a wealth tax, what they really want to do is hide it in an income tax. So what they want to do is raise the rates above 45, but they'll call it a payroll tax or a solidarity tax or something else. Or they'll attack savings by denying deductions for contributions. But if you look at it, a universal income grant, it's just not affordable. And you can say whatever you want, but it's just not affordable, and you're gonna offend one group or another. It's always great to redistribute the money, but the question is who you're going to take it from.
What's also fascinating is that the Tax Indaba takes place just a month before the expected medium-term budget policy statement. How much of the climate in terms of economic trajectory in South Africa has changed between now and what we saw during hard lockdown of COVID-19? And how much of that speaks to the changes that we need to see in tax regime in the country?
Yeah, well, if you take a look, and that was the beginning of the Indaba, you can see it was on a number of press reports, that, the economists looking at the situation, it's more than just the COVID story. If you look over since 2008 all the way now to 2022, our growth has been anemic. Now, we had a major drop from COVID. We've come back almost to the levels of pre-COVID, depending on who you talk to. But the problem is your rates are about 1.5, 1.7, as you previously discussed here, I just heard earlier. The problem is, and that's what the economy showed, is that the size of the working population has remained roughly the same over the last 10 years. Yet the population has grown. In 2000, the population was 45 million. Now it's 60 million. So you've got about 15 million now carrying 65. That's the problem. And the problem is we're not getting real growth, and it's only sporadic. And so we've had a commodity cycle. We're now beginning to come off that again. And so the numbers are not there. And in order to get tax going and get enough money to invest in infrastructure and elsewhere, you need to have enough of economy to do that. And unfortunately, the policies that we've had have restricted growth. And it's not been a tax problem. The real discussion has been, it's been an expenditure problem. So if you take a look really where the battle lies, if tax can only do so much, we can only get so much money out of the economy. And you'll see that our rates of tax are roughly the same as Europe. Yet we're not getting the same value add. We're getting a very weak value add. And so one, money isn't going where it's supposed to go. Two, it's going to a lot of places where it's government bloat, there's corruption. And frankly, we're not putting it into the infrastructure. And infrastructure is where the growth is. And the other problem in this government is it's addicted to regulation. And it regulates and over-regulates, and it slows business down. Now, maybe there are good purposes over certain regulation, but there comes a point that regulation has a price. And so the purpose of the indaba was to say that expenditure drives policy and tax. Tax doesn't go the other way. And if you have a bad expenditure policy and you have a bad regulatory policy, tax is not going to save you. And really, when you look at the Treasury, you look at the Revenue Service, they have handled the situation fairly well. They've done as much as they could over the last number of years, but their options are simply too limited because of the other parts of government.
Thank you so much for your insights. That's the CEO at SA Institute for Taxation, Keith Engel, talking to us this morning about the agenda at the 2022 Tax Indaba.